Have you ever heard of a man who faced 300 enemies with his bare hands and won? No, we are not talking about Samson or some legendary hero of ancient Greece. We are talking about a name buried in the lines of the Bible, Abishai, King David's nephew, Joab's brother, and one of the fiercest warriors Israel ever had. He never sought the spotlight, but his actions screamed louder than any trumpet on the battlefield. While David was the king chosen by God, and Joab was the commander everyone knew, Abishai was the strong arm that moved in the shadows, discreet but lethal, loyal but implacable. When danger approached, it was Abishai who advanced first. When David needed someone by his side on a risky mission, it was he who appeared. When death seemed inevitable, it was this almost anonymous warrior who changed the destiny of the battle. But who was this man who appeared in the most crucial moments, always ready, always daring? Why do most people barely remember his name? What did he do that was so remarkable that the biblical writers included him among the most valiant of all time? Before we continue, write in the comments where you are watching this video from. I want to know how far the word of God is reaching. Like this video, and if you are not yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Abishai was more than a warrior. He was a symbol of unwavering loyalty and courage beyond the normal. He didn't just fight for the king, he fought for God's promise over Israel. His blood cried out for justice, his sword answered the call, and his heart beat in the same rhythm as the throne he protected. His journey begins in the midst of a family involved with war, politics, and faith. Son of Zeruiah, David's sister, Abishai grew up seeing his uncle being persecuted by Saul, seeing brothers become generals, and seeing chaos turn into a calling. He didn't ask to be a hero. He only answered when war knocked on the door. Today, we are going to unearth this forgotten story. We are going to follow in Abishai's footsteps and discover why he deserves a place among the greatest. Abishai grew up surrounded by a family that breathed tension. He didn't need to leave home to hear conversations about war, betrayal, anointing, kings, and persecution. His mother was Zeruiah, David's sister. This made him a direct nephew of the man who would one day be king of Israel. But this blood tie went beyond a family title. They carried a story marked by struggles in common. When David was a fugitive, Abishai was already a young man in training. He saw his uncle being unfairly hunted by Saul. He saw the loyalty of men who hid in caves with David, and this shaped his worldview. Loyalty was not something he would learn later. It was natural. It came from within, from the root. It wasn't forced. It was lived. This connection became even more evident when David began to form his army of valiant men. Abishai was not just another warrior in the crowd. He was someone who knew David's heart, and this made him a valuable ally. In moments of risk, David trusted few. Abishai was among these few, but this proximity also came with tension. The blood between them was the same, but the ideas didn't always match. Abishai had a direct, straight sense of justice. He didn't like messing around. When he saw a threat, he wanted to eliminate it. David, even being a warrior, carried with him the responsibility to act with mercy, and this created conflicts of posture between them. Even so, Abishai never crossed the line of rebellion. He could question, suggest, even insist on a different path. But in the end, he obeyed. There was respect. And there was a certainty in his heart. If David was on the throne, it was because God had placed him there. And that was enough. The blood that united them was not just a detail, it was an invisible thread that kept the two connected amidst the most difficult decisions. David was the king, Abishai was the shield. And even without needing the spotlight, he showed that being next to someone chosen by God was more important than appearing. Abishai's trust in David came from within, but the respect that the other warriors had for him came from what he did on the battlefield. He wasn't much of a talker. He showed who he was by fighting, And it was in one of these battles that his name was engraved among the most respected in Israel. The enemies rose up on all sides: Philistines, Ammonites, Syrians. The war was constant. There was no break. In one of these campaigns, the enemy was numerous. The people of Israel were already tired, but Abishai did not back down. He didn't wait for orders to act. When he saw the threat, he went for it. That day, he came across a multitude of warriors. The number did not paralyze him. He did not hesitate, did not ask for reinforcements, did not flee. Abishai went for 300 men and won. It wasn't just courage. It was preparation, skill, and strength. But above all, it was faith. He fought believing that God was with him. This feat did not go unnoticed. Records show that he became the main one among the three, a special group among David's valiant men. He was just not considered greater than them because he was not part of the original trio. But the respect he gained that day was definitive. No one doubted his strength anymore. It wasn't an ordinary fight. Facing 1, 2, even 5 enemies was normal. But 300, this required more than physical strength. It was focus, discipline, and endurance. Abishai was not driven by fame. He didn't need to prove anything, but that moment showed the people that he was on another level. After that, his name was remembered with honor among the greatest warriors of Israel, not as someone who spoke well, but as someone who acted when he was most needed. His courage was silent, but firm. When chaos arrived, he was the first to react. It was this type of attitude that made him a reference among David's valiant men. And from that day on, when the army needed someone for a difficult mission, Abishai was always one of the first choices. He did not seek recognition, but his deeds spoke for him. After Abishai stood out on the battlefield, it became clear that he was not just brute force. He was someone who knew how to listen, obey, and act with precision. Therefore, when David decided to enter Saul's camp, surrounded by soldiers who wanted him dead, he did not choose just anyone to go along. He called Abishai. It was night. Everyone was asleep. Saul was in the center of the camp, with soldiers scattered around. David wanted to prove that he was not an enemy. He wanted to show that he could take Saul's life, but he wouldn't. This required more than courage. It required self-control. And Abishai, even being impulsive at other times, knew when to stop. The two entered without making a sound. They passed the armed men. They arrived at where Saul was sleeping. His spear was stuck in the ground. Abishai looked at the scene and whispered, "God has delivered the enemy into your hands. Let me hit him with just one blow." David looked at him and replied firmly, "No one can touch the Lord's anointed." At that moment, Abishai held back his will. He had the perfect chance to end the threat that had been persecuting his uncle so much, but he respected David's decision. He didn't complain. He didn't insist. He obeyed. They took Saul's spear and jug of water and left the camp without anyone waking up. This mission was not a simple entry and exit. It was a test of loyalty, control, and obedience. David trusted Abishai because he knew that even being firm in his decisions, he would know how to back down when necessary. That night made it clear that Abishai was not just a warrior in open battle. He was also a man of trust in moments where everything could go wrong. When the sun rose, David showed the spear and jug in the distance, proving that he could have taken Saul's life, but spared it. And who was with him at that moment? Abishai, not as a spectator, but as a direct participant in the riskiest mission of that phase. This attitude had no fireworks or celebration, but it further strengthened the relationship between the two. David knew he could count on him in any situation, even the most delicate. Living with David required more than courage. It required control. Abishai had already proven that he knew how to respect limits, but this did not erase his instinct to protect those he loved. He was loyal to the end, and when he saw someone dishonoring the king, his reaction was immediate. He wanted justice right there, right now. One of the most striking episodes was when David was fleeing Jerusalem during Absalom's revolt. In the middle of the road, a man named Shimei appeared. He began throwing stones, cursing and cursing David as if he were a traitor. The king was tired, humiliated, in flight, but Abishai couldn't take it. He turned to David and said, "Why should this dead dog curse the king? Let me go there and cut off his head." David took a deep breath. He looked at Abishai and replied, "If he is cursing me, perhaps God allowed it. Leave him alone." This answer did not erase Abishai's indignation, but once again, he gave in. He put away the sword. He didn't agree, but he obeyed. This was the type of conflict he faced frequently. On one hand, the justice he believed was necessary. On the other, the king who chose to act with mercy. On another occasion, when General Abner came to negotiate peace with David, Abishai and his brother Joab did not accept it. Abner was the same man who had killed Asahel, their brother. When David made an agreement with him, Abishai was outraged. Even without the king's order, Joab called him aside and killed him. There are no details as to whether Abishai participated directly, but he was beside his brother in this decision. These episodes show how seriously he took loyalty. For him, protecting David was more than a mission, it was an obligation. But sometimes this protection wanted to manifest itself with violence. And then came the conflict: follow the heart or obey the king. Even with these tensions, Abishai never broke with David. He continued to be by his side, even when he didn't understand his choices. His loyalty was not blind, but firm. He could disagree, but he continued to protect. This type of fidelity was rare, and even if it generated friction, it strengthened the trust between the two. Justice was something that moved Abishai. He did not ignore betrayals, nor did he accept enemies walking free as if nothing had happened. After Saul's death, the throne was not immediately free for David. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was placed as king over part of Israel. This generated direct conflicts between those who followed David and those who were still linked to the house of Saul. In the midst of this division, there were betrayals. 2 men broke into Ishbosheth's house while he was sleeping and killed him. Then they took his head to David, thinking they would be rewarded. But David did not see that as a victory. He saw it as cowardice. He ordered the 2 to be executed immediately. Abishai followed these events with attention. For him, whoever betrayed had to pay. But even in such cases, he learned from David's decisions. He understood that justice was not doing things your own way, but acting firmly, without losing respect for the king's orders. While the political tension was being resolved, the enemies around continued to rise up. And that's when the Philistines attacked again. Abishai didn't think twice. When he heard that there was a battle, he put himself on the front line. He didn't wait for others to solve it. He went there and faced it. Along with Joab, he participated in direct campaigns against the Philistines, especially when David could no longer go out to war as before. In these fights, Abishai showed that he hadn't lost his rhythm. Age didn't stop him. He continued to be the one who advanced without fear. In each battle, he carried with him a sense of responsibility. It wasn't just about defending the people. It was also about punishing those who tried to destroy what God had raised up. His sword was not moved by personal revenge, but by a strong sense of justice and protection. These moments reinforced the respect that the other soldiers had for him. They knew that when Abishai was present, the fight had another weight. He did not back down. He was firm, direct, and faithful to his principles, and wherever he went, he made it clear that with him there was no room for dishonor. In the wars against the Philistines, David no longer had the same vigor as in the early years. His body felt the weight of the battles, and the enemies realized this. One of them, called Ishbi-Benob, saw a golden opportunity. He was a descendant of the giants, strong, armed, and went straight for the king with the aim of killing him. David was vulnerable. His strength was not enough at that moment. Abishai saw the scene. He didn't think twice. He ran towards the enemy and faced the giant with the decision of someone who would not let the king fall before the eyes of the army. There was no time for strategies. It was a matter of seconds. He arrived before the final blow and killed Ishbi-Benob. This moment marked a turning point. After that, the soldiers asked David not to go out to the battlefield anymore. They said clearly, "The king cannot extinguish the lamp of Israel." They knew that if he died, the people would lose their way. David accepted. It was time to lead in another way. But on that day, it was Abishai who prevented the worst. This episode was not a feat of war like the others. It was more than defeating an enemy. It was protecting the life of the one who represented God's promise over Israel. Abishai was not there out of vanity nor out of glory. He reacted because David's life had value for him. After that, his position among the warriors became even more solid. He was seen as someone who not only won battles, but who saved lives. And this put him on a level above most. No one doubted his courage. But now everyone knew that he was also someone who could be trusted when everything was hanging by a thread. Abishai didn't boast. He didn't go around bragging. But that day was recorded. It showed that he was attentive, willing, and prepared to act in the most difficult moments. When everything seemed about to be lost, it was he who decided not to let fall what so many fought to raise up. This attitude reinforced what David already knew. On the field, Abishai was more than a soldier. He was living protection. Abishai's strength on the battlefield was known, but he was not the only one in the family with this profile. His brother Joab was also feared, tough, direct. The two sons of Zeruiah carried a fame that went beyond wars. They were brothers, fighting partners, but they were not always aligned in decisions. Joab was the commander of the army. He had leadership, a firm hand, and a cold way of dealing with situations. When he needed to kill, he killed. He didn't ask for authorization. He fulfilled what he thought was right, even if he went over the king's orders. Abishai, even being impulsive, respected the limits more. He obeyed, even when he disagreed. This difference in posture created tension. There is no record of direct fights between them, but the paths they took showed the contrast. Joab killed Abner without David's permission. Then he killed Amasa too. These decisions were not discussed in public, but they created weight behind the scenes. Abishai, on the other hand, was never seen taking this type of attitude on his own. He followed, even in a harsh way, what came from the king. The relationship between the two brothers was marked by proximity in battles, but distance in moral limits. They were on the same side, but acted in different ways. In wars, they fought together. When David divided the army, one led one part, and the other remained with the rest. They were efficient, they were strategic, they gave results. But within them, the principles clashed. Abishai was not subservient to Joab. He had his own vision, his own rhythm, and this made him more balanced. The people knew who the sons of Zeruiah were. The name of their mother was remembered as a mark of strength, but also of rigidity. David himself even said, "You, sons of Zeruiah, are too hard for me." He saw how difficult it was to control the two brothers. Even so, Abishai's presence alongside Joab in the campaigns kept the army united. They did not move away, even with differences. Each knew his place. And Abishai, even with less power than his brother, showed that character weighs more than position. Even living with harsh decisions and with brothers who exceeded limits, Abishai stood out for another path. He was not the type to ignore orders. He could disagree, even speak firmly, but he followed what David determined. He was obedient without being passive. He had initiative, but knew how to back down when the order was clear. In wars, this behavior was repeated. When David ordered to retreat, he retreated. When it was time to advance, he led. He didn't do things his own way, even having the experience and strength to do so. It wasn't for lack of capacity. It was for respect for the authority that David represented. There were situations in which this obedience was put to the test. Shimei, for example, the man who cursed David on the way to flight, was spared at that moment. Later, after David returned to the throne, Abishai continued to think that he deserved to die. Still, he didn't act on his own. He waited. He kept the indignation and maintained focus. Even when he was in the field without direct supervision, he followed David's principles. He didn't repeat Joab's behavior, who killed by his own decision. Abishai was daring, but respected the command. He was firm, but didn't cross the line. This balance was rare among the valiant men. David trusted him because of this. He knew that he could send Abishai on any mission and that he would fulfill exactly as he was instructed. He didn't come back with excuses. He came back with results. And he did it without running over the limits. This trust is not built from one day to the next. It was forged in battles, in quick decisions, and in moments of pressure. Abishai was also not manipulated. He obeyed because he chose to obey, not out of fear or insecurity. When he thought something needed to be done, he said it. He spoke clearly. But if the answer was no, he respected it. This differentiated him. He was strong enough to make decisions, but humble enough to accept orders. This posture kept him firm alongside David throughout his life. Even when everything changed, when enemies arose from inside or outside, Abishai remained reliable. He doesn't appear in the texts as someone who sought influence or position, but every time danger arose, his name returned. Unlike Joab, who was involved in political disputes until the end and ended up executed by order of Solomon, Abishai disappears from the records silently. There are no details about his death, nor about his end, but this does not diminish the impact he had. His absence of scandals and his firm posture speak louder than a story full of titles. The next generation may not have mentioned his name as much, but the deeds he performed were recorded among the most valiant men of David's time. It is there, written clearly. He raised his spear against 300 enemies and defeated them. He saved the king from being killed by a giant. He was by David's side in moments that required more than strength. They required discernment and mastery. There are not many who can balance courage with obedience. Abishai managed. He wasn't perfect, but he was constant. When the others changed sides, he remained in the same place. When the decisions became difficult, he didn't run. He listened, evaluated, and followed the path that David traced. This type of example is what remains, even when the name is forgotten. History is made by those who appear in the spotlight, but also by those who support what is behind. Abishai was that type of man. Strong, decided, present. His life teaches that not always the most remembered are those who contributed the most. Sometimes those who speak the least are those who hold the weight of the battles the most. Abishai's legacy is in his firmness. He showed that it is possible to be loyal without being blind, to act with daring without breaking the order, to protect without seeking recognition. And for all this, he deserves to be remembered, not as a supporting actor, but as an essential part of David's story. If you like Bible stories like this one of Abishai, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next videos. Leave your like and share this video with someone you love and needs to learn more about the Word of God. May God bless you and see you in the next video.